there are very few things that could be more important than your former coach speaking in front of Congress about the status of college football. But Alabama's getting a football commitment. It was one of them.
You are Locked On Bama, your daily podcast on the Alabama Crimson Tide. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back into Locked On Bama. Luke Robinson, that's me. Jimmy Stein, that's him. Jimmy, today, well, actually yesterday, Alabama got a commitment really just after we finished taping our last podcast about, hey, will Alabama be getting a commitment soon? And we thought that maybe Duke Johnson would be next on the list. He's committing March 20th. Instead, it is a wondrous surprise from Derek Smith, a wide receiver / safety from, you gave me a wince when I said surprise. I know it wasn't really a surprise. It was a surprise in the timing.
The timing was a little bit of a surprise. Yeah, we told people to be on the heads up that it was looking good, that it was looking good for Derek Smith. But yeah, the timing of it was, we didn't know it would be, that day. And frankly, I thought I would have guessed Duke Johnson first, but Duke is going to announce his commitment on March 20th, and Derek went ahead and popped yesterday. But I couldn't be more excited. This is one of my favorite kids in the whole class in terms of like a projected class. Derek would have been one of my favorites, whether he committed yesterday or you had to wait all the way to signing day in December. We'll talk about him some more coming up, but a big for Alabama for multiple reasons. But that was a good day picking up Derek Smith.
So ESPN has him ranked as the number 29 player. You guys have him. He's calling right now to verify that ranking.
That's him on the phone. He doesn't even like being ranked 29th. He's like, I want to be higher than that.
I know. And the problem is, it's my father trying to ding me, so he will not stop trying to ding. Now he just stopped. Okay. But anyway, so the ESPN has him as the number 29 player. You guys have him as a top 50 player. Some 24/7 has him. You guys have him as the number 2 player in the state. 24/7 has the number 7 player in the state. I tend to believe the truth is in the middle. I'm going to say he's probably more like the 4th or 5th best player in the state, depending on how you rank guys. But that's what I would go with, my own personal ranking. Regardless, I think is huge. And some other news out there. And look, because we're a little late for the podcast today, I know a lot of people have already read up on Derek Smith. So we just wanted to say, how awesome we think it is. And it's wonderful. Meanwhile, there was also a report out on Bama Online that Caleb Falk will be returning to Alabama shortly. He grew up an Alabama fan. His brother is at Auburn, and Keldrick Falk, he was going to FSU the whole time, committed to FSU for a long time, flipped to Auburn right the last second. And Caleb is committed to Auburn as well. But he's given Alabama a look, and I wouldn't say it's out of the realm of possibility. It's certainly something that might happen.
Yeah, it's a strong. I would say a maybe on younger Falk. He's a maybe. Could be more. And this is just me speaking out of turn. I don't know this, but I get that could be a camp type situation where we'd love to see you in camp, and at that point decide what level of priority. But clearly, Alabama has a lot of interest there. Caleb said in his interview at BOL that he speaks to Christian Robinson, who would be his position coach at Alabama, on nearly a daily basis. So, hey, when you're talking to the assistant at Alabama nearly daily, you are a high priority. They don't do that for every kid that they just want to see in camp. There's not enough hours in the day, So he's clearly on Alabama's radar. Good prospect, in my opinion. Caleb Falk, you're talking about a top 15 prospect in Alabama, top 15, top 18. Derek Smith, different beast altogether. Like Luke said, anywhere from the second best player in the state to maybe number 7. I think you'd be closer to that. Number 2, love Derek Smith, always have. The real reason I think Derek Smith is big, first of all, the player, the prospect himself. He's an outstanding prospect. I think a fair comp for him in terms of like what type of player can he be is like an Eddie Jackson, who was one of my favorites at Alabama. I think Derek Smith is physically very similar to Eddie Jackson at the same stage. And in fact, when some people might hear that and go, oh yeah, you're comparing him to an NFL All-Pro. Let's remember this. Derek Smith is much more highly rated at this point in the process than Eddie Jackson was. Eddie became what Eddie became, but Derek Smith at this point is a more highly rated prospect than Eddie was when Eddie came out of South Florida, in high school. Derek's already a national top 50 type prospect. But this is why it's big. There's a little PR to this that makes it bigger than, hey, you picked up a great safety prospect. The PR is this. Auburn's been recruiting the heck out of that kid for 2 years. And most of the recruiting industry for the past 2 years, if you ask somebody that works in recruiting and they go, give me a guess on where Derek Smith from Selma's going to end up. For 2 years, you heard probably Auburn. Kalen DeBoer gets to Tuscaloosa and he's there for 2 months and the kid publicly commits to Alabama. I mean, Kalen DeBoer did in 2 months what Auburn didn't do in 2 years. And there was this perception when DeBoer showed up that, hey, initially he's going to be playing second fiddle to Hugh Freeze. Hugh's been here. All the kids know Hugh. They don't know Kalen DeBoer. These guys from Washington, they can't recruit the South. They can't recruit Alabama. Well, here's Kalen DeBoer picking up maybe the number 2 prospect in Alabama after knowing him for 2 months. I wasn't a kid they were recruiting at Washington. They don't know where Selma is in Washington. That wasn't a kid that was on the DeBoer radar until he got to Tuscaloosa. Derek is a great prospect that was at one point a heavy Auburn lean that will probably end up ranked in the top 50 nationally on all the services. That was a big, big day for Alabama, just getting Derek Smith. Again, he can play multiple positions. Eddie showed up. I compared him to Eddie, right? Eddie showed up at Alabama playing cornerback. People might have forgotten that. When Eddie showed up year one, while he learned the system at Alabama, he played corner. He was then moved to safety where he flourished. Derek is just like that. Derek might play corner. Derek might play nickel corner. He could even play offense. And if the kid shows up at Tuscaloosa and says, hey, coach, I want to play receiver, guess what? He's going to play receiver. He's good enough to where he can sort of pick what position he wants to begin, which is very common in the transfer portal era. Explained that on yesterday's show. These days, when the transfer portal era, you don't tell a kid, I know you want to play tight end, but we think you're a linebacker, so you're going to play linebacker. You tell a kid that wants to play tight end, he's not going to the linebacker room. He's going to the transfer portal computer that they keep in the Rose building at Alabama, and he's entering his name in the portal. So you don't
have a computer dedicated for that?
They do. Yeah, it's in the Rose administration building too. They think it's best if it's not in the athletic department. That they try to keep that separate. So that kids, once they decide to go in the portal, aren't recruited as they walk all the way to enter their names in. You know what I'm saying? You go to a neutral building, which is where the administration at Alabama is and not the athletic part. Now, I know it was. Maybe they've moved it. But to my knowledge, it initially started there. The actual transfer portal, which is obviously that's a website, but there is a specific workstation where you can officially enter your name. And by the way, one other rule, people get confused on this all the time. There's a windows of when you can get in the portal and when you can't. You satisfy the window if you just simply inform Alabama that you intend to enter the portal. You don't have to literally type your name log into the system and literally type your name in. If you send an email to Greg Byrne or any administrator at Alabama that says, I intend to enter the portal, you have satisfied the NCAA's rule for the window in terms of getting in the portal at the proper time.
Jimmy, when we come back, we're going to talk about who you think really quickly is the next to commit. I'm going to assume it's going to be Duke Johnson, but I want to confirm that when we come back. I do want to tell you a quick computer story. I think I've told it on here before. And I told it to our friends that I met who watched the program the other night that back in the mid-'80s, my dad gave me a Tandy 2000 or 3000 or 1000 or whatever it was. It was one of the first computer, from Radio Shack, gave it to me for Christmas. And I set it up, and it was this gigantic box and this gigantic keyboard.
Probably weighed 100
never done it.
Probably weighed like 100 pounds. Probably weighed
no,
like
so heavy. So heavy. And I turned it on, and all of a sudden, like that cursor just starts flashing. I mean, it was like taunting me. It's just flashing. It was like, what do you want to do? And I said, Dad, what am I supposed to do? He said, this was his serious response. He said, well, ask it who's going to win the Super Bowl. And so I typed in who's going to win the Super Bowl. And the thing just kept flashing at me. And then it dawned on me, like, if this computer that Dad just got me from Radio Shack knows that answer, I mean, isn't that just very, it's either really coincidental or this football is much more fixed than I ever thought it was. But anyway, I need to tell everybody about FanDuel. Hate when that thing has a delay. I don't know if I actually hit it or not, but I do know one thing you can hit is FanDuel. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with things like quick bets or live same game parlays or exclusive props for players or teams or games or whatever, and much, 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 much more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. And I'm sure it's going to be a splash. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, the delay on this thing is starting to tick me off. All right, so who is
when you ask your computer that your dad got you in the 80s, who wins the Super Bowl, then it tells you, and then you run to FanDuel and you place your bet.
Exactly. That was going to be my next thing. I mean, if this Tandy 2000, 1000, whatever it was, knew that answer, then doesn't that mean Radio Shack's in on it? Somebody had to tell the computer, because there was no internet. There was nothing I was hooked into it was just, it's in the computer.
It's almost like your dad invented the internet in the mid 80s, just with this question. Because I guess you could ask, because now you can ask, Siri, you can ask, I would say, Alexa, but when I do that in this living room,
I know you
start speaking to me. But you can ask computers that stuff now, and they'll give you some level of an answer to that. So it's almost like your dad could see the future. I think that's really cool, even though we clearly didn't really know how to turn it on or what it did.
The way we used to turn it on, it had a button about this big, like a little toggle, and you went. I mean, like now, you just lift the screen up, everything lights up, and it already tells you what the weather's like. My computer didn't do none of that. My computer ended up being the world's most gigantic paperweight. But anyway,
you couldn't even send emails back then. What did we do with it? You couldn't even send emails.
We could barely send regular mail then. But anyway, all right, Jimmy. So really quickly, who's next? Duke Johnson, is that who's next for real?
I mean, my guess would be Duke Johnson, just simply because at BOL, we believe Alabama leads for Duke Johnson. Duke, by the way, is the #2 rated athlete in the country by On3 Sports. He's a top 10 prospect in the state of Georgia. He's linebacker, safety type. I think he's probably linebacker long-term. And it would be a big pickup. Another very highly regarded guy, ranked nearly as high or as high as Derek Smith. It would be the equal to picking up Derek Smith. Duke Johnson is going to make his public commitment known on March 20th. So I would say that Duke is next, but Alabama is in good shape for a couple other kids that could happen. The linebacker from the Atlanta area, I think it's Luke Metz. He likes Alabama a lot. That's a guy that could commit. Josiah Sharm, a defensive line. Sharma, he's a defensive lineman from California. He likes Alabama a lot. That could happen. And here's one, Luke. I know this is dreaming a little bit or wish casting, but the top 2 quarterbacks on Alabama's board in the 25 class, Juju Lewis from Carrollton, Georgia, and Deuce Knight from Lucedale, Mississippi. These are the top 2 quarterbacks on the board for Alabama. It would not be out of the question that one or the other committed to Alabama at some point fairly soon. I don't even have a projection as to which one of the 2. I just know those are the 2 at the top of the board. They both like Alabama a lot, even though they were currently committed to other schools. With Juju committed to USC, Deuce Knight from Lucedale, Mississippi, committed to Notre Dame, both seriously considering flips to other schools, including Alabama.
Okay, so Nick Saban went in front of Congress today. Yes. He had a lot of interesting things to say. One of the things was, if this is a quote from Saban, if we had some sort of revenue sharing proposition that did not make student athletes employees, I think that may be the long-term solution. You could create a better quality of life for student athletes. You could still emphasize development. You can still create brand and athletic development with a system like that, and it would be equal at all institutions. You couldn't raise more money at one school to create a competitive advantage at another. I think what he's saying has a ton of merit. And I've already seen some Auburn message boards. Well, he's been paying players. Look, quit with that for now. Just what he's saying is correct. What he's saying is correct. Now, here's the thing. It can't happen with 133 schools or whatever it is. It can happen with about 40 to 50 schools, somewhere in there. And so what we're trending towards is a super league with different a super league with less teams, and it's going to be more NFL-ish than ever before. I mean, tell me where I'm wrong, Jimmy.
No, that's what I believe. This is where it's headed. I don't have a timeline for it. I don't know if it's going to be mandated by Congress or the NCAA or a new entity altogether. But best guess, as of today, we're headed to a 45 to 65 team league that has its own set of rules, that's funded by enormous TV contracts, and the players share in that money. And there will be no more NIL collectives, no more booster paid players. The players will be paid through a portion of the TV contract, very similar to how the NFL works. But like Luke said, it wouldn't work with the 130 schools, because there wouldn't be enough money to go around for 130 schools, particularly in a situation where the bottom 65 won't ever be really participating in the playoff that's generating most of this money. So it is going to be the rich for the rich, and the ESPN and Fox and network money going directly to the players. And while a lot of people don't like it and hate it, I will just only say it's better than what we've got right now, which is a complete mess, which is why Nick Saban was talking to Congress and sitting next to Ted Cruz today, in a speech to the Senate, because we have such a mess that they're all in Washington today. Saban, Greg Byrne, Greg Sankey, all of college football is up there asking the government for help. That's when things aren't going great. But
yeah, when we're asking the government, as you know, that's bad.
When we need your help, you're already in big trouble.
And they were like, "Oh my God, we were going to call y'all, but for help." But no. So here's a couple other things. First of all, Byrne made a great point about, hey, look, we lose money when you take away football and basketball. We lose, in fact, a good bit of money.
Yep.
So if this does happen, and let's say this thing does break away from the NCAA in some way, form, or fashion, everybody keeps talking about Title IX. Well, Title IX wouldn't apply anymore. It just wouldn't be a thing. So you might not have to have. I mean, my understanding, you're the law talking guy, but that's my understanding, Jimmy.
Well, that it's all complicated. I mean, when I say that, that sounds like a cop out, but really it's more than a 30-minute show to hash all that out and what it would mean.
You've got 30 seconds.
I think it just depends on what form this is ultimately taken. For instance, right now, the collectives in NIL does not apply to Title IX, because collectives aren't part of the university. They're not a public thing. Collectives are private entities, not subject to Title IX legislation. Public universities are. Anybody that receives federal monies are subject to Title IX. So it just kind of depends on what form this new Super League would take. But as of right now, I mean, I don't like it really as much as anybody else. But right now, what it really looks like is you got the Big Ten, which is like the AFC, and the SEC, which is going to be like the NFC. And the NFC teams are going to play all year, and the AFC teams are going to play all year. And then there's going to be a playoff with the 8 best AFC teams and the 8 best NFC teams, and they're all going to have a playoff with a Super Bowl at the end. That's what it really it appears like this will look like, with the players making, roughly $50,000 to $100,000 a piece, plus legitimate NIL, meaning that hey, Jalen Milroe, if you sign a deal with Dr. Pepper and they want to put you in a commercial, all that money is yours. That's yours. We got nothing to do with that. No different than NFL players like Mahomes and his State Farm commercials.
But
Players will still be able.
The difference to me, Jimmy, would be that I don't think anybody now. I mean, I guess maybe I remember Shaq wanting to go to LA, and he said part of it was because of movies and because of brand recognition, whatever. But I think when you're talking about a free agency, for example, we're going to talk about that in the next segment. More often than not, the free agency isn't determined by what advertisers they think they can get. Like, Josh Jacobs is going to Green Bay. I don't think that, I don't think Green Bay said, man, we got a cheese manufacturer that is going to just fill your pockets with cheese curds. Or, because if that were the case, everybody'd go to Dallas, right? I mean, they're the number one brand in the NFL.
No, that's exactly right. NFL free agency, I think they look, I mean, when a player is deciding, hey, I'm a free agent, where am I going to sign? And they have multiple options, I think they look at things like location and weather and where their family lives naturally and where they're from and their favorite team and their teammates. I think those are all minor factors. There's just one overwhelming factor, and that's who's paying the most. And that's what we have in college football right now. But under this new system that's being proposed, everyone's going to be paid the same, other than, as Luke points out, other than kids getting their own NIL deals. That'll be easier to do in some markets than others. And that will continue to be a factor, I think, in recruiting.
So it's really going to be like the same under the table type stuff. It's above board, but it really is sort of like that because it's,
right.
If you go to, Alabama's a bigger brand, so they will, it's still not going to be the parity everybody's talking about.
I don't think it'll be complete parity like the NFL, and I think that's exactly right. Really, what this new system that looks like it's going to be created is going to do, guys, what we're really talking about here is ending booster-led collectives and replacing that with revenue sharing from TV contracts. So instead of
boosters still may hand some stuff under the table also, which
I think boosters will also go back to their role of building facilities instead of paying players and maybe paying for things like, hey, we sure could use $100,000 so we can have a girls tennis team, instead of handing $100,000 to the quarterback, which is kind of what's going on now, so I think
Alabama.
It won't be perfect. It won't be a perfect system. It's still going to be problematic. There'll still be issues, but it seems much better than the complete wild, wild west chaos we have now of basically no system.
The Alabama women's rowing team brought to you by Archibald's Barbecue. All right. I need to tell everybody about Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little bit further? Ever wonder what adventure could be lying around the corner? Our friends at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs with the capabilities to take your adventure to the next level. Look, you got the 2024 Nissan Rogue. It's perfect for city drives and great escapes. Class exclusive Google built-in is always your updating assistant to call on for almost anything. The 2024 Rogue is perfect mid-size crossover for your next adventure. Then there's the 2024 Pathfinder. It has room for up to 8 and expansive cargo capacity and advanced available 4x4 capability. With 284 horsepower and up to 6,000 pounds of towing, when adventure calls, the Pathfinder is there to answer. Take the Nissan Rogue, the Pathfinder, or even the Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. So speaking of free agency, like we were just a minute ago, King Henry has moved to the Queen City of Baltimore. And I think this is a good landing spot. I sort of got the feeling this was going to happen yesterday. Lamar Jackson put out like an Instagram reel or whatever, where he was like dancing and celebrating something. And everybody started putting some pieces together there. And you felt like he would end up. I mean, that's a deadly combo, Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. And look, I know, does he have his his fastball? Is it the same as it ever was? Of course it's not. I mean, he's 30-ish, so, or might be right at 30. But do you know anybody that wants to tackle him? And I'll tell you something else. I saw a picture of Tony Pollard trying to score a touchdown against the Dolphins. I think it was this past year. And I mean, it looked like he had a wide open end zone. And he ended up, and somebody said, do you think Derrick Henry would have scored here? Because apparently Tony Pollard must have gotten tackled before the end zone. And I'm thinking, yeah, he would have fallen down and made it and just stretched out and made it. Derrick Henry still won it. Look, I'm going to tell y'all something. Everybody's going to call me a fool. Derrick Henry is as good of a college running back as I've ever seen. I include Herschel Walker and Bo Jackson and Reggie Bush. I include them. And he's in the discussion. The reason he doesn't get the same amount of love is because in those days, Bo and Herschel were so different. They were just so big and so different. Imagine trying to tackle Derrick Henry back then. He's even bigger than they are. I mean, I'm not saying he's the same level of athlete. I mean, he might be though, but I do believe Derrick Henry's as good a running back as there's ever been in college football. I'll go to my grave thinking that. I know I'm not going to get agreement from a lot of folks. I'm just telling you, all you got to do is watch some highlights. Watch that Mississippi State game from his Heisman Trophy winning year. Talk about a couple of times when Gary Danielson was like, I used to talk about all the time how Gary Danielson in the middle of a broadcast, he knew when we were playing, something would always happen he'd go, oh, geez. Like he had no commentary. And that happened a couple of times in that game. So Derrick Henry at Baltimore, I think that's great. Xavier McKinney signed with the Eagles. No, or Green Bay.
Was the Packers. Xavier McKinney signed with the Packers along with Josh Jacobs.
That's right. Xavier McKinney to the Packers. Saquon Barkley signed with the Eagles. And Josh Jacobs signed with the Packers. So now, I mean, hey, look, I think the Packers went from no Alabama players.
Correct.
To two now. So I dig that.
There was no Alabama players in Green Bay. Irv Smith, our former tight end, re-signed with no, he didn't re-sign. He's gone to the Chiefs, which is, the Chiefs have a prominent tight. The Chiefs have a prominent tight end. You may have heard.
Do they have one? They have a tight end?
I can't remember his name.
I bet he can't get a girlfriend.
I can't remember his name. His girlfriend might be. I can't remember her name either. Seems like she's fairly significant. Maybe
Taylor Hicks. Is he dating Taylor Hicks?
But
I did tell Taylor Hicks that one time. For those who don't know, Taylor Hicks is a buddy and a good super dude. And I said, if Taylor Swift fans are called Swifties, are your fans called Hickeys? You should be capitalizing on that, right? Was that a delayed
Taylor
laugh?
Hicks fans called Hickeys. The more I wrap my head around that joke, the more I like it.
It's actually marketing genius.
Had Taylor Hicks ever heard this before? I mean, are you the first one to come to him with, are your fans called Hickeys?
I don't know. He sort of just looked at me like, please stop talking now.
Your time for talking is over.
I've given enough time to you.
It is just funny to me that when I saw Irv Smith going from Bengals to the Chiefs, and I'm like, the Chiefs already sort of have a tight end. And I'm like, oh, yeah, he sort of happens to be like the most famous athlete in the NFL right now, thanks to his girlfriend, Taylor Swift. But Irv Smith, I assume Irv playing tight end for the Chiefs doesn't entitle Irv also to a global superstar, pop star girlfriend. I assume that's not.
If he starts dating Rihanna, that's going to be nuts.
It is. Like, oh, welcome to our tight end room. Your girlfriend is Megan Thee Stallion.
Okay. So who else? Josh Jacobs, Landon Dickerson did re-sign with the Eagles and for a boatload of money.
Highest paid guard in the history of the NFL, which A is just shocking. And B, boy, does anyone get worse treatment in the NFL than guards? You have to be like the best guard in 3 years to be drafted in the first round.
I know. Well, I mean, good for him.
And the highest paid guy of all time only, and I'm using the air quotes for those listening on the podcast, the highest paid guard of all time has like a $50 million deal. So guards get the short end of the stick when it comes to the NFL. But you try to play NFL games without a guard. See how far that gets you.
It's not going to be good. And then there was one other one, Jimmy. I know we had discussions like just in our little chat group that, I mean, where's Julio going to end up? Will he maybe sign with the Dolphins just for like a day contract and retire? I hope not. I want Julio to keep playing, but that's just me because I'm selfish.
Yeah, I think if Julio does a sign and retire thing, it would be with Atlanta, which is where he made all his hay. But I hope Julio feels like he's got another year in him. I hope he does. And, because I'm not done with watching Julio Jones play football. I know he's not. He's just a shadow of what he was. And this is what happens when you get to that other side. But, I would like to see Julio continue playing, but he's certainly made enough money. He's in the Hall of Fame. He's in the Hall. He's a slam dunk Hall of Famer. So we'll see what happens with Julio. I hope he just signs with a contender, and we could possibly see him in the playoffs and in the Super Bowl next year. But hey, if he just does a ceremonial sign with the Falcons and retire, we'll just count down the days till we see his acceptance speech in Canton, Ohio, in 4 years, 5 years, or whatever it is.
All right, that's going to do it for today's pod. We'll be back tomorrow with more. Until then, roll tide, everybody.
Roll Tide.